You're looking live at the White House, where President Trump is set to welcome French President Emmanuel Macron in about 15 minutes. Now, this is the first visit of a European leader, and it's somewhat of a diplomatic blitz. We know on Thursday he will welcome Keir Starmer of the UK amid high-stake talks about the war in Ukraine, Israel, NATO, and beyond. We will keep you updated on all the news as it happens, as President Trump is about to meet with Emmanuel Macron discussing tariffs, the European Union, and so much more. Hello, everyone. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-host, Emily Compagno. Also joining us, Ainsley Earhart, Fox & Friends co-host. Marie Harf, Fox News contributor and former State Department spokesperson under President Obama. And Paul Morrow, Fox News contributor, attorney, and retired NYPD inspector. Well, the clock is ticking for federal workers to comply with DOGE head Elon Musk's request for productivity reports. He asked them to prove that they earn their taxpayer-funded paycheck. There's this email that went out on Saturday night. It was from the Office of Personnel Management, sent out to all federal workers, more than 2 million of them. And here was the subject line: what did you do last week? The email reads, as you see here, please reply with approximately 5 bullets of what you accomplished last week. It also sets a deadline for tonight at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Tick, 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 fast approaching. Now, Musk says failure to respond will be interpreted as a resignation. He added this on X. The reason that this matters is that a significant number of people who are supposed to be working for the government are doing so little work that they are not checking their email at all. In some cases, we believe non-existent people or the identities of dead people are being used to collect paychecks. In other words, there is outright fraud. And President Trump is backing Elon Musk up on this one. Look at this. He reposted this edited SpongeBob meme to troll Democrats and other critics who are up in arms over 5 bullet points. So we know where President Trump stands. You know, Ainsley, we just saw the email. The email didn't contain a threat. Yes, the Elon Musk Truth or Twitter, whatever it was after, kind of emphasized there could be consequences. But I'm struck by the reaction. This is from a huge union that represents federal government workers. Look at what they said. This email is nothing more than an irresponsible and sophomoric attempt to create confusion, bully hardworking federal employees that serve their country. They're demanding the email be rescinded, and an apology to all federal employees. Hakeem Jeffries decided to take it up a notch, and he said Elon Musk is traumatizing hardworking federal employees, their children, and families. I mean, I don't know that it's traumatizing to ask for 5 things you did at work.
No, not at all. If your boss asks you, what are the 5 things you accomplished last week, then you just tell your boss. I think Elon's doing this. I think it is for fraud. We know the Social Security, they have lists and lists of thousands of people that are between the ages of like 100 and 150. Well, no one's living at 150 in America, right, or anywhere in the world. So they shouldn't get Social Security checks. Same thing's happening here. He's going through and he's making sure that these individuals are really working, that they are individuals, and to make sure that he holds them accountable and make sure that people aren't just getting paychecks and that person doesn't even exist. So this is all to save the taxpayer money. I think the only thing missing here is consultation. I think that the heads of these departments need to be involved in this so that there's not friction between the heads of departments and Elon Musk, so that the Trump team is working together.
Emily, and that's a really interesting point, because you do look, and there was some pushback from NIH, from DOJ, you saw FBI, Kash Patel put out something, Department of Defense, the acting Secretary of Defense. So some of these individuals were not Trump appointees, some of them are acting. But nonetheless, you do have agencies pushing back a little, and we'll see where Trump comes out on the side of Elon Musk or some of these department heads.
Right, and I think the arguments varied amongst the agencies and for different reasons. So some were arguing privacy and security, which is a whole different argument than those knee-jerk reactions from AFSCME and NTEU union heads saying it's irresponsible, it's traumatic. I want to underscore that for a moment, because as a federal attorney, you could not make 1 inch of progress in terms of efficiency or productivity without the union knee-jerk pushing back. And it was so, at the time, disheartening to me to see people whose full paychecks and full 100% of their time, as they were stewarded and paid by the American people, were working on behalf of the unions. But at the end of the day, it stopped being a representation of the employee. It stopped being a representation of the employee against, the robber barons of the past and sort of these overreaching bosses. What it was simply a massively opaque protection and a bristling at the notion that you even had to account for yourself. And I posit legally, as employees, we are entitled to specificity from our bosses, right? You have to know, you have to have an articulable, point-by-point position description. So why can't the inverse be true? Why can't our bosses have the same specificity with our production and productivity so that they know exactly what we are doing and how we are complying with these position descriptions? At the end of the day, for efficiency, I think if the whole point is simply ascertaining those who are fraudulently collecting paychecks, then it should indeed go through the department heads and the team heads, because that's the only way to steward the thousands and thousands of emails that will now flood to Elon Musk. But if I was still a federal employee, I personally would be proud of what I had accomplished and would have responded immediately.
Maria, I think, there's a risk of oversimplifying all of this, because I do think federal employees fall into three buckets. You have the political appointees, some of whom are thrilled that this is happening. They see this as a revolution in government. Then you have this other pot of hardworking federal government employees. I don't think they care who the president is. I think they care deeply about their job, and that pot does exist. But that is not all federal workers. There are federal workers that have this attitude. This was an NBC anonymous communication that came to them. Saw this a few weeks ago. This is a federal employee at the Department of Veteran Affairs. A lot of us are going to stay out of spite, they said. We're here for however long we want to be here. I could be here until retirement. In 30 years, the Trump administration is only here for 4. What's wrong with trying to root out an employee staying out of spite?
Well, there are both legal problems, and I think we're hearing that from some of the unions. There are contracts that have been negotiated. But more importantly, this is just the latest in a string of attacks on public servants that have happened for the last month. I spent 10 years in the federal government. Most of the people I worked with at the CIA or the State Department were hardworking, patriotic, dedicated Americans. These federal workers aren't just in Washington, they're around the country. We had 1,000 Veterans Affairs employees fired by DOGE in the last few weeks, including some that manned the suicide hotline for veterans. We had FAA safety officers mistakenly fired, and people that work on avian flu. The reason our eggs are so expensive is because of bird flu. So moving fast and making public service employees feel like the enemy and make it seem like it's something that's dishonorable is very difficult for people across the country. And that's why you see people in red states and red districts going to town halls with their members and saying, I have honorably served my country for 20 years, and I got fired for no reason by Elon Musk, who, by the way, makes millions and millions of dollars from the federal government himself. And he's firing people who make $50,000 a year for no reason. So I think morally, this has been really disheartening to see how they're going at someone so rich as Elon is going after public service employees and not doing it with a scalpel, not having their managers be the one to do it. DOGE isn't managing these people. And at the same time, people across the country can't pay their mortgages or put food on the table for their kids because they got fired from a job they thought had job security. That is not electorally or morally a good plan, I think, for Republicans.
I hear what you're saying, but in all due respect, I do think it's an oversimplification. I do think that there are employees that should be rooted out. I mean, Paul,
but that's not what they're doing, right?
Background
but aren't they all
knowledge.
still getting paid through September, so they could potentially get another job and then they have 2 paychecks?
Some of them are not.
Those that didn't take the buyout, I guess.
Some of them are not. Many of them are not getting paid.
But Paul, this is the background. This is why this matters. It's easy to oversimplify and point to some stories of individuals who got termination notices. But the background is this. This is not a Republican newspaper, a conservative newspaper. This is the Washington Post 4 years ago. Resistance from within the federal government. Listen to this. Less than 2 weeks into the Trump administration, federal workers are in regular consultation with recently departed Obama-era political appointees about what they can do to push back against the new president's initiatives. There was even a support group that took place about how to resist the Trump administration. That should not happen, because that is undermining the will of the American people.
That's the deep state right there. And where was this scalpel under Obama and under Biden, right? Where is this surgical paring away of the extraneous employees who don't show up? This, by the way, was simply, I think, a ruse on Musk's part, which is, hey, let's see who opens the emails. Because if the email doesn't get open, my understanding is one of the metrics they're going to use is let's see who looks. Because if you don't even look, now, if you're on vacation, fair enough. You're in the Bahamas, that's how it went. Okay, you got an excuse. But if you're supposed to be at work and you don't even open up the email from OPM, Office of Personnel Management, and by the way, I'm glad he's in the Office of Personnel Management because last time I heard about them, they gave up my security clearance to the Chinese.
Same.
But that said, they have to figure out who's actually coming to work. The NYPD used to have a unit, believe it or not, that would fly around the world, mostly to South America, to see if the pensioner was still alive who was collecting the pension, because it goes right into the bank. You can access it anywhere. And they would find out that the girlfriend has been collecting a pension for 20 years because the guy died of a heart attack. So this is the kind of metric that you obviously need. And if you can't articulate 5 things that you did that'll keep you at least past the first bump of this thing, then you know what? Maybe you shouldn't be working in a
You could write outnumbered on Monday, outnumbered on Tuesday, outnumbered.
Your 5 coming. Yeah.
I mean,
Fox
that's,
and Friends on Monday.
that's just it. If you asked me like 5 things I did at work, I don't think I would have a panic attack and say you're traumatizing my children. I think I'd write down the 5 things I did at work.
And you got to be careful of the managers. I know we all want the managers dealt in there, that's fine, but the managers get very close to these people. They go to each other's Christmas parties and everything else. And, you know, you got to be careful. I like a little bit of a hard approach, and then let's take a step back and do a real examination.
Yep. And we will see where this lands in just a few months. A lot of people excited that we might get a leaner and meaner federal government because you're paying for it after all. That's your taxpayer dollars.